David Reimer has had a long time love for and fascination with comic books. And so David pitched this idea to me of Crime Does Not Pay, which is based on the true story of an animator from the late 40s, early 50s named Bob Wood, who was an illustrator and writer for this particular comic book.
When I was a kid, that's in the 60s, the comics I read always had a little white sticker at the top, approved by the Comic Code Authority. In the 40s through to the early 50s, there was no Comic Code Authority. A fair amount of those comic books, in fact most of them, were incredibly violent. In 1954, this code came in and literally neutered comic books. Now Bob Wood, because of that, he spiraled down and eventually ended up performing one of the criminal acts that he had sort of done in his own magazine, right?
Kind of the whole thing is, what happens when art mirrors reality. I also find it very interesting, the notion of exploring the whole tortured artist thing,
He gets his first job and then he ends up in like a lounge, celebrating, having a celebratory drink. And Violet is the lounge singer, she's the house band. There's a lot of questions of the destructive patterns that we enter when we are in relationships, and was it just with that person, or is it something that we repeat?
When we started writing these pieces, we said, well, okay, we want the music to evoke that era. So some of it is rooted in jazz and the idea of, the old-fashioned sort of jazz torch song. We looked at Frank Sinatra, the Andrews Sisters, Doris Day, some big band, Glenn Miller. There is also a folk tradition, a blues tradition. So we really, we wanted the palette to be large, and then we just put our own twist on it.
It's fun because it's very collaborative to work together. Obviously Chris and David have created these beautiful lines and melodies, and so, but when we come in, they're still wanting us to give our input in terms of different voices of instruments or harmonies, or how we can, shift it a little bit.
I don't often play percussion, so that's been really interesting, but also a treat. Gives me a nice little break from playing the trumpet.
So we're working with an illustrator to create a bunch of original artwork for us, because the story is kind of its own comic book, which is even seeping into some of the costume design, some of the makeup design. So it's almost like you're watching a comic book come to life on stage.
I am playing Eleanor Flood. She's coming from a background where she is concerned about what the comic world is doing for the next generation. She sees a pattern, and I think she wants to highlight it and call people to account and make people aware and cautious about the danger of the stories we tell.
I think the beautiful thing about the show is that although it's set in the 40s and 50s, so many of the ideas and questions that the piece is raising are still really relevant to today. It's a question without an easy answer. There are certainly arguments to be made for both sides, and I think that the kind of engaging work that Downstage always wants to produce is work that presents both sides of those and allows the audience to enter into a conversation around how they feel relative to that question. And I think that this show will do a really good job of that.